Dee Dee Myers of Vanity Fair magazine, a former press secretary for President Bill Clinton, and presidential historian and author Douglas Brinkley.
Welcome.
Thank you. These inaugurals are always historic occasions, but now we have 3 presidents in a row who have served 2 terms, and that is unusual. That only happened one other time in American history. You recently were with the president. He's thinking a lot about his second term, right?
Oh, well, absolutely. I mean, asking himself, how did he time manage the first term, and can you time manage the next one better? But more to the point, he's looking at some of the past second inaugurals, particularly Abraham Lincoln's in 1865, which famously said with malice towards none and charity to all. And afterwards, there was a big mob of people coming to meet Lincoln. He did a meet and greet, and there was Frederick Douglass, and they didn't want to let Douglass into the executive mansion. And he brought Douglass in and said, "I saw you out there in the crowd. You're the one person I wanted to have a word with. What did you think?" And he said, "Mr. Lincoln, the speech was sacred." And that meant everything to Lincoln. And here, Frederick Douglass is a figure we need to think about more as we're building here in D.C., the African American History and Culture Museum.
Do you think that there has to be an iconic line in the speech for it to be considered a good speech today?
In a soundbite culture, it's awful important, right, that, you know, the media gets onto one, and it's such words that you can carve it in marble, or at the very least have it as a great Twitter in today's age. But it's important.
140 characters or less.
It's also important to say something. Some of them are just like a sing-song, and there's a lot of music to them, but they're very forgettable. George Herbert Walker Bush, which nobody mentions, I think did a good inaugural. He called it the new breeze, but he was telling us democracy was coming to Russia and Europe, and that there's a new wave coming. And of course, the Berlin Wall came down later that year.
Dee Dee, he has a wide audience here, from the world to the country, but also to Republicans.
Right.
He's shown some toughness after the election. What's the right tone?
Well, I think he's not talking to political leaders today. He's talking to the American people, and even beyond that, to people around the world. So I think it's very important that he send a message to them that he's the president of all Americans. He did that. That was one of the things I do remember from last year, was he tried to reach out to people who didn't vote for him. I think it's very important that he does that again, to say to people, we need to work together. That was a message loud and clear in the election season. It's been a message loud and clear from the American people since, that they want people to come together. And I think he has an opportunity again to bring people together, even though second inaugurals and second terms are much more partisan by definition.
When you look at what he is considering now, he also has to be cognizant, you would remember this, of the fact that there is not much time.
There's
the
not much time.
opportunity for a president to act and define himself is
in the second term, because the midterm elections will be definitive, right? And that the campaigns for the midterms will start maybe a year from now, maybe less. And so he has the period between now and when that starts to make his most important accomplishments of his second term, which will define the second term in many ways. So that's why you see him working so hard right now on gun control legislation, to see how that's going to move forward, on immigration, reaching out to Republicans and having conversations on energy, the big primary objectives of the second term. A lot of work to be done, and some opportunity to accomplish it.
And I know you both believe George W. Bush had Katrina 7 months in, I think, and of course President Clinton had impeachment just 1 year into his second term. But you believe quickly that you can still accomplish a lot in a second term.
Absolutely. I mean, look what Dwight Eisenhower did in his second term. He dealt with the Little Rock situation in civil rights, letting people know Brown versus Topeka was the law of the land. Ike created NASA, created ANWR, the Arctic, our largest wildlife refuge, demilitarized Antarctica. And then Bill Clinton, what would he have been without a second term? He is able to go around and talk about the surplus because he had a second term. And Ronald Reagan, I'm tired of hearing about Iran-Contra as it was that big a deal. His diplomacy with Gorbachev was what was a big deal, and that was second term Reagan.
Right.
So you're not worried about a second term curse for President
Not
Obama?
only am I not worried about it, I don't think the president can afford to be worried about that. He's got to move forward, as Dee Dee said, immediately, and have optimism at his
And
sail.
make sure his team is focused on the agenda and getting things done.
Dee Dee, you have had the last word.